Imagine like stepping on a rake in the dark.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Ouch.
Right. The heavy wooden handle just smacks you squarely in the face. The sting is immediate. The shock is completely visceral. And, your very first instinct isn't actually to check your nose for blood.
No, of course not.
Your instinct is to furiously look around and find out who left the rake there.
I mean, it's basically the ultimate human defense mechanism, right?
Exactly.
Like when we experience sudden pain, especially the psychological pain of a sudden failure, our ego just goes into overdrive searching for a scapegoat.
Oh, 100%.
You start thinking, well, the test was rigged, or, the questions were deliberately misleading, or maybe the person holding the clipboard just had some sort of personal vendetta against us.
We have all been there. I mean, we have all felt that exact sting. But today, we are taking a deep dive into the architecture of failure through a highly specific and honestly, unexpectedly profound lens.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
We are unpacking the intense, high-stakes world of professional Pilates certification. And, whether you are a fitness fanatic who spends every morning in a studio or someone who hasn't seen the inside of a gym since high school.
Which is totally fine, by the way.
Right, totally fine. But the psychology of what happens inside these practical exams reveals just an incredible amount about how we all handle setbacks, accountability, and really the pursuit of mastery.
It really does. It serves as a perfect microcosm for adult learning. I mean, the stakes are deeply personal. The financial investment is, well, it's significant. And the physical demands are just incredibly rigorous.
Yeah. And to guide us through this world, we have an exceptional piece of source material today. We're looking at a comprehensive article by Caroline Berger the Femini.
Yes, a fantastic source.
For some context, she is the founder of the BioPilates Paris Studio, the creator of the BioPilates Deep Dive podcast, and a highly experienced Stott Pilates and gyrotonic instructor and trainer.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar with the terminology, STOTT is this highly contemporary, anatomically based approach to Pilates. It focuses really heavily on preserving the natural curves of the spine and joint safety.
Right, it's very precise.
Very. And gyrotonic involves these incredible fluid circular movements using specialized wooden machines, the ones equipped with weights and pulleys.
They look almost like medieval contraptions, but they're amazing.
Exactly. And Caroline has spent 18 years training instructors in these complex systems. 18 years administering the practical exams that basically determine their careers.
That's a lot of exams.
Yeah, and that kind of tenure gives someone a razor-sharp view of human nature.
So, the mission of our deep dive today is to break down why failing one of these practical exams feels so uniquely devastating. We're going to look at the hidden iceberg of effort required to master a physical discipline and unpack why our brains instinctively want to, demonize our teachers when things go off the rails.
Because it would be a good one.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the point of impact. What is actually happening in the immediate aftermath when a student gets that failing grade?
Well, according to Caroline's firsthand experience, it is just profoundly destabilizing for the student. I mean, you have to understand the context of the moment, right?
They didn't just show up on a whim.
Exactly. These candidates haven't just skimmed a textbook over a weekend. They have often spent 6 months to a year in training.
Wow. A whole year.
Yeah, and they've invested thousands of dollars. They've sacrificed their weekends, woken up at 6 in the morning to practice before their day jobs. They've poured just massive amounts of physical and emotional energy into this whole process.
So the stakes are sky high.
Sky high. So when that negative result comes down, the pain is not abstract. It is a very real, very heavy loss. The initial reaction is this crushing disappointment, and then, within minutes, that disappointment often curdles right into self-protective anger.
Which brings us right back to the rake in the dark.
Yes, the rake.
The immediate thought is, the examiner was completely unreasonable, or my teacher just did a terrible job preparing me.
Right. The student searches for an external reason because internalizing that failure is simply too heavy in the moment. It's just too much. But the source material flips the camera here to a perspective the student, and honestly, the general public rarely considers.
Which is?
Caroline points out that failure is always a profound wound for the instructor, too.
See, that reframes the dynamic completely for me.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, because we are so conditioned by movies and pop culture to picture the examiner as this stoic, emotionless gatekeeper. They just stamp fail on a clipboard, check their watch, and move on to lunch without a second thought.
Oh, yeah, the classic villain trope. But the reality for dedicated educators is entirely different. When a student fails, the instructor's immediate reaction is almost never to blame the student's work ethic.
Really, they don't just think, oh, they didn't study enough.
No, not at all. Instead, they turn the magnifying glass on themselves. They initiate this intense, just agonizing mental autopsy of the entire training period.
Wow.
Yeah, a good teacher will literally sit in an empty studio after the exam and review every single demonstration they gave over the last 6 months.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. They wonder if they spoke too fast during the anatomy module. They question whether they offered the right tactile cues or if they should have provided more emotional support to that specific candidate.
It reminds me of like a coach watching a player miss a penalty kick in the final seconds of a championship game.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. The coach is pacing the sidelines,
Yeah.
just agonizing over whether they ran enough pressure drills in practice or if they should have simulated that exact high-stakes scenario one more time.
Exactly.
But ultimately, when the whistle blows, the coach cannot step out onto the field, push the player aside, and kick the ball for them. So I have to ask, where is the line? Like, where is the boundary between a teacher's responsibility and a student's?
Well, Caroline maps out that boundary with total clarity. A teacher can give their absolute all, they can offer infinite patience, share their proprietary teaching methods, and, repeat the same gentle corrections 50 times in a single afternoon.
Which I'm sure happens a lot.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But they hit a hard, impenetrable wall eventually. The teacher cannot go home with the candidate.
Right.
They cannot open the dense anatomy manual on the student's kitchen table at 10 o'clock at night. They can't listen to educational podcasts during the student's morning commute. And they certainly cannot absorb the complex biomechanical information on their behalf.
It can lead the horse to water, basically.
Exactly. Once the designated training hours are over, the responsibility for learning shifts completely and entirely to the student.
Okay, so because the teacher's jurisdiction ends at the studio door, the sheer volume of solo work waiting for the student at home must be staggering.
It is. It really is.
Which is a perfect pivot to the actual workload. I think the general public, and likely a lot of enthusiastic beginners who want to turn their hobby into a career, severely underestimate what it actually takes to earn this credential.
Oh, completely.
The perception is often, hey, I've taken a lot of group classes, I'm pretty flexible, I have good balance, I'll just knock out a certification over a couple of weekends.
Yes, the infamous weekend certification illusion. People assume that if you know the name of an exercise and you can physically demonstrate it with good form, you are automatically qualified to teach it to someone else.
Right, like monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly. But Caroline's article systematically dismantles this idea. Being able to perform the movement beautifully is literally just the starting line. It means you are a good practitioner. It does not mean you are a good teacher.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's actually look at the math of mastery here, because this blew my mind. Instead of just talking about the syllabus generally, let's look at what the source material says it takes to master just one single exercise in the repertoire.
Yes, let's do it.
Take a classic Pilates movement, something recognizable like the 100. The student isn't just learning how to count to 100 while pumping their arms, right?
Oh, not even close. To successfully teach the 100, a student must deeply understand the why and the how behind every micro movement.
Every micro movement.
Yeah. They need to know the ultimate biomechanical objective, that it's designed to dynamically warm up the bottle, stimulate circulation, and stabilize the lumbopelvic region.
Okay, so that's the big picture.
Right. Then they have to memorize the precise muscular recruitment. It's not just, using your core.
Which is what everyone says.
Exactly. But they need to know they're specifically targeting the transversus abdominis, the obliques, the pelvic floor, and the hip flexors.
And that is purely the baseline anatomy. Like they haven't even brought a client into the picture yet.
Nope. Then they have to layer on the breathing mechanics. Why do we inhale for 5 percussive beats and exhale for 5? Because it forces the client to oxygenate the blood while maintaining deep abdominal engagement. But, and this is crucial, the knowledge can't stop at the ideal scenario.
Right, because no one is ideal.
Exactly. The instructor must know the contraindications, meaning, when is this exercise actually dangerous? If a client walks in with a severe cervical spine injury or osteoporosis or asthma, the instructor has to know exactly how to modify that breathing pattern or support the neck on the fly without, breaking the flow of the class.
So they have to anticipate The physical compensation. Let's say you have to watch a client's body and realize, oh,
Ah,
they're dumping all the tension into their lower back instead of using their abdominals, and then possess the exact verbal and tactile cues to fix it instantly.
yes. And according to the source material, if a student is preparing seriously, mastering the complexities of that single exercise takes between 5 and 10 hours of dedicated study, physical practice, and deep reflection.
Wait, 5 to 10 hours for one movement.
For one movement, yes.
Okay, so let's multiply that by reality. A standard foundational Pilates repertoire contains around 40 exercises. If we do the math, we are talking about hundreds of hours of personal, solitary work. You cannot cram hundreds of hours of anatomical application into a Sunday afternoon study session before Monday's exam.
You really can't. And it highlights why a legitimate professional certification carries so much weight. True teaching success isn't built under the bright lights of the studio while the teacher is watching.
It's built behind the scenes.
Exactly, in the invisible hours. It's the week after week accumulation of solitary study. Caroline offers a phenomenal benchmark for this, actually. She says you have not mastered an exercise when you can perform it yourself.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, you have only mastered it when you can explain the mechanics flawlessly to someone who knows absolutely nothing about Pilates and get them to execute it safely.
That is the ultimate litmus test for comprehension. I mean, if you can explain it to a beginner without using jargon, you actually understand it. But I want to play devil's advocate for a moment on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
Because if someone is looking at a Pilates class through the window of a studio, it often just looks like a series of simple commands, right? The instructor says, get on the machine, push the carriage out, come back in, inhale, exhale. If the physical action is that straightforward, why isn't a few hours of memorizing a script enough to just shout those instructions?
I get that. It looks simple because a masterful instructor makes it look effortless. It's the same way a professional dancer makes a leap look weightless.
Right, they hide the work.
Exactly. But teaching is not just acting like a human metronome. The source text makes it very clear that teaching is an incredibly complex intellectual and anatomical puzzle.
How so?
Well, it involves knowing exactly why you are demanding an exhalation at a specific millisecond of the movement, perhaps to engage the deep core just before heavy load transfers to the lower spine.
It strikes me that teaching Pilates is less like being a cheerleader and more like being a pilot in a cockpit.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, like you have this complex machine, the reformer with its springs, pulleys, the moving carriage, and the foot bar. Managing the equipment alone requires intense focus. But on top of that, you are simultaneously reading the passenger's medical chart. You are managing a human being with a unique, often complicated physical history.
That analogy captures the cognitive load perfectly. You aren't just teaching an idealized body from a textbook. You are teaching the person in front of you.
The real, flawed human body.
Right. Like, what happens when your 4 o'clock client has kyphosis, an exaggerated forward rounding of the upper back?
You can't just treat them like everyone else.
Exactly. You can't just tell them to lie flat on the carriage. Their head will tilt backward, completely crunching their cervical spine. You have to know how to prop their head safely.
Wow.
Or what if they have scoliosis or a severe hip limitation from a past surgery? You have to adapt the entire routine in real time. You have to explain dense anatomy in a way that is immediately accessible, reassure a client who might be terrified of aggravating an old injury, and build a logical, safe progression.
So the practical exam, then, isn't just a memory test. It isn't checking to see if you can regurgitate the names of the muscles.
No, not at all.
Hmm.
It is testing your clinical judgment under pressure. It's evaluating whether you have the capacity to teach intelligently and safely when the variables inevitably change.
Okay, let's talk about the modern student's toolkit, because this dynamic has shifted massively over the last couple of decades.
Oh, huge shift.
When the founders of these movement methods were learning, information was incredibly scarce. Today, candidates are just swimming in high-quality resources. We have beautifully detailed full-color manuals. We have countless educational podcasts, interactive anatomy quizzes, frame-by-frame video breakdowns in our pockets.
Still all right there.
Right. Caroline herself even wrote a specific book for this exact purpose, titled Anatomie et Pilates Révision et Préparation à l'examen, le corps de la tête aux pieds.
Beautifully pronounced, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But seriously, it is literally a comprehensive head-to-toe guide designed specifically to help future instructors pass this exam. So with an abundance of tools like that at their fingertips, how are candidates still failing?
Well, the article presents a crucial reality check about human behavior here. We have a tendency to confuse the access to information with the actual acquisition of knowledge.
Oh, that is so true.
Right. Possessing a resource is entirely different from internalizing its contents.
It is the trap of passive consumption.
Exactly. Carolyn spells it out with just bracing honesty. She says, buying a comprehensive anatomy book does not mean you have studied it.
Right.
Downloading an educational podcast to your phone does not mean you actively listened to it, paused it, and took detailed notes. Having the official manual sitting on your nightstand through osmosis, that does not mean you know the material.
I feel personally attacked.
I think we all do. These resources are incredible tools. They act as powerful accelerators for learning, but they are never, ever substitutes for the grind of hard work.
It is exactly like buying a premium gym membership. You buy the expensive membership, you purchase the high-end workout gear, you spend hours perfectly curating your high-energy workout playlist.
Oh, and I've been there.
Right. But you never actually drive to the gym and lift a single weight. And then 6 months later, you are furious at the gym owner that you haven't built any muscle.
The psychological mechanism is identical. You feel productive because you gathered all the materials, but you skip the execution. And when the exam exposes that lack of execution, it leads us directly back into the trap of the blame game we discussed earlier.
Let's pull on that thread. If the work is demonstrably this complex and the resources to succeed are widely available, why do students still default to blaming the teacher when they fail the practical?
It really comes down to ego preservation. Facing the reality that you simply didn't work hard enough or study smart enough is a really painful pill to swallow. But Caroline observes a tragic irony in this defensive reaction. When a student systematically demonizes their instructor, when they attribute every failure, every missed cue, and every forgotten muscle group to someone else's shortcomings, they are paradoxically robbing themselves of the ability to ever progress.
Because if you convince yourself that the teacher is the sole point of failure, you're essentially giving yourself a free pass to never change your own habits.
Bingo.
You don't have to audit your time management.
Yeah.
You don't have to rethink your study methods, and you don't have to look at your personal discipline. You stay completely stagnant because you've decided your process is already flawless.
Exactly. By casting yourself as the victim of a bad teacher, you trap yourself in a cycle of failure. Conversely, the source material notes that the candidates who progress the fastest, the ones who ultimately become exceptional instructors, are the ones who are brutally honest about their own preparation.
They don't make excuses.
Right. They possess the emotional maturity to look at a failing grade and say, okay, I demonstrated these 5 exercises perfectly, but I clearly blanked on the contraindications for the intermediate block. I need to rebuild my knowledge there.
So they treat the failure as data. It's a diagnostic tool, not an indictment of their inherent self-worth.
That's exactly it. They view corrections as a lever for progress rather than a personal attack. The text emphasizes that humility is arguably the single most vital trait for any future instructor.
Humility. That's powerful.
It is. Accepting a correction isn't a sign of weakness or incompetence. It is undeniable proof of a desire to be better. In the world of movement science, and honestly, arguably in any professional field, learning does not stop when you get the certificate. It continues until the very last day of your career.
So, as we pull back the lens, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you are studying to be a Pilates instructor or, you are an engineer writing code, a manager leading a team, or a nurse caring for patients. How does this very niche, very intense practical exam relate to the bigger picture of our own lives and professional hurdles?
It all distills down to the ultimate why behind the exam. Caroline synthesizes this beautifully at the conclusion of her piece. We often view tests and exams as these bureaucratic, institutional gatekeepers, right?
Yeah, just red tape.
Exactly. We think they exist just to protect a specific teaching method or to defend the prestige and reputation of a certifying school.
Like the institution just wants to keep its fail rates artificially high to look exclusive and rigorous.
Yes, but that is a fundamentally flawed perspective. The exam does not exist to protect the institution. The exam exists to protect the client.
The actual person walking through the studio door on a Tuesday morning.
Yes. Behind every single exercise listed on that syllabus is a real, living, breathing human being. And that person might be walking in with chronic lower back pain that keeps them awake at night. They might carry deep physical fears after a traumatic injury. They have serious physical limitations, and they come to you with incredibly high expectations for their own healing and strength. When you step into the role of an instructor, your responsibility is immense.
You are literally taking their physical well-being and their trust into your hands.
You are. You have to observe their movement patterns, analyze their weaknesses, program a safe routine, correct their form, explain the mechanics, and support them emotionally, all with absolute precision.
It's so much more than just a workout.
It really is, and that is what the practical exam is truly measuring. It is measuring if you are fully prepared to safely hold that immense responsibility. The ultimate goal of the certification process isn't just getting a passing grade stamped on a piece of paper. The goal is becoming the caliber of instructor that your future clients deserve.
That completely reframes the concept of a test from a personal hurdle into a public safeguard. Thank you for breaking down the mechanics and the psychology of that for us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. We've navigated a lot of complex terrain today, from the immediate emotional sting of a failing grade to the hidden hundreds of hours of anatomical preparation, all the way to the vital, transformative power of humility. But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. It's a thought that builds directly on Caroline's profound point about protecting the client. If an exam's true purpose is to protect the vulnerable person on the other side of the service, rather than just grading the student, how does that completely change the way we should look at the licenses, the certifications, and even the past failures in our own professions?
That's a great question.
Are we just studying to pass a test and collect a credential for our resumes? Or are we truly studying for the person who will one day have to rely on our expertise? Think back to that rake in the dark. The sting of failure isn't just a bruised ego. Maybe it's the exact recalibration we need to make sure we don't let someone else down when it really counts.